Okay, today's lesson is lesson 8, cattle ranches. If you enjoy biting into a juicy steak or gulping down a hamburger at your favorite restaurant, you have a ranch to thank for that delicious meat. Ranching is a type of farming that focuses on raising animals on large areas of land. Ranching is most common in dry temperate areas. The prairie regions of Canada, the western U.S., the pampas of South America, and the outback of Australia are the places on Earth with the most ranch land. Though spread across the globe, all of these places have much in common: relatively dry climates and a lot of natural grassland. Ranchers aim to raise their animals on natural grass as much as possible. While some ranches like to finish growing the animals destined for market with grain, the more free grass they consume, the less expensive it is for the rancher to raise them. Ranchers have different challenges in different areas. In Canada, they must prepare for the long, cold prairie winters where the ground is frozen and covered in many inches, if not feet, of snow for several months. In the U.S., northern ranchers struggle with the same challenges as Canada. Ranchers further south encounter near desert-like conditions. The hot temperatures and dried grasses are similar to what ranchers encounter in South America. Ranchers in these areas must make sure their animals are grazing in areas that have a sufficient water supply. Australian ranches have very dry months as well as seasons of rain. They must learn to adapt to these two extremes to successfully raise their animals, which Australian ranchers have done very well. Some of the biggest ranches in the world are found in Australia. Cattle ranchers are the most common type of ranch. However, there are many different kinds of ranches around the world today. Other animals that are often ranched include bison and elk. There are even animals you've probably never thought of as being raised domestically, like alpacas, emus, and ostriches. And you can find ranches that raise all of these creatures as well. Raising cattle. When we learned about dairy farms, we learned about several different breeds of cattle. Those were just a small number of cattle breeds. There are many others. Dairy breeds are bred to achieve high milk production. The breeds most often used by ranchers are bred to produce larger amounts of meat and a more desirable texture. These animals have more muscle mass and more fat. This makes the meat more tender and of higher quality. Some of the most common beef breeds in America are the black and red Angus breeds, Herefords, Charolais, and Simmental. I don't know how to pronounce those. Other less common breeds are Highland cattle and Texas Longhorns. Most cattle breeds used for beef production in the world have origins in Europe. The cattle industry, however, has used selective breeding techniques within many of these breeds that have been made stronger and more unique to the area where they live. Cattle in Australia have been bred to survive the unique environment of the outback. Most of the breeds found in Australia were developed there and are not widespread throughout the world. Several breeds were developed crossing the Brahma cattle from India with British cattle, Angus breeds, or Charolais. Some of these breeds have maintained the hump that is characteristic of the Brahma, while others simply have the genetic advantage of being able to survive hot, dry temperatures more readily than other breeds alone. Ranches in Australia are known as stations. They have vast tracts of land for the animals to graze. Despite having some of the largest ranches, the terms of land area in the world, Australia is not the largest producer of beef on the world stage. While all farming requires a dedicated lifestyle of caring for creatures or fields, ranching is more than that. It has its very own culture. Cowboy culture is an important part of ranching, and it has permeated ranching areas for centuries. If you've ever gone to a rodeo, you have had just a small glimpse into cowboy culture. Today, rodeo events are approached as competitions and athletic events, but they are deeply rooted in the skills needed to be a successful cowboy. Chasing down a calf and roping it has historically been a necessary skill to castrate and brand cattle. Riding bucking broncs was a skill needed to tame and eventually train wild horses that were captured for use on a ranch. The skills used in barrel racing of changing directions quickly at a high speed are necessary in herding, rounding up, and driving cattle. Rodeos developed through the years as ranch hands began to compete against other hands from different ranches to prove they were the best. This type of stuff, the rodeo type stuff, your Uncle John rode in what they called gymkhana, and they would barrel race, and he was very good. He got many trophies for doing that in his younger days, just for your information. The herds of cattle that roam the ranch land of the world are an important part of their local economy. As the West was settled, bison were hunted to extinction in much of North America. This made space for huge cattle operations to thrive without the natural competition of the larger animals. Natural grassland used to raise cattle helped maintain the ecosystems of the area as long as they were not overgrazed. Cattle were once grazed in wide open spaces with no fences. Many ranching herds intermingled with each other. Branding the calves that were added to the herd each spring was necessary to identify whose cattle were whose when it was time to take the cattle to market. As fences became more popular and ranchers herded their cattle alone, branding was used to deter cattle rustlers from cutting fences and stealing animals. These brands that they're talking about, my dad had a cattle brand that was his own, and Levi now has that cattle brand. I gave it to Uncle John, and when Uncle John passed, they gave it back to me, and I gave it to Levi. While many ranchers today use ear tags instead, still some brand their cattle to identify them. The process of branding involves using a hot metal object with the rancher's symbol on it. It burns the skin, causing a permanent scar that makes the cattle as belonging to the ranch. Young male calves that are destined for market are castrated during branding so they do not mature into bulls. These steers have meat that is not as tough as a bull's and has a milder taste. The heifers, female cows who have not given birth, are also branded, but these cows are often added to the herd rather than sold for food. The ear tags that many ranching operations use today help to sort their cattle. Different colors and numbers can help ranchers easily identify specific cows within the herd. There are many controversial topics when it comes to ranching. Branding and rodeos are two topics that spark heated debates. Feedlots are another hot-button issue in the cattle industry. Many ranchers take their steers to feedlots to finish growing them to a marketable weight. These cattle are fed a rich diet of grains and kept in confined spaces. This makes them gain weight faster and have more fat. Cattle that are finished on grass tend to be leaner and their meat has a different flavor. While other types of farms rely heavily on machinery and equipment, the most important thing for a cattle ranch is to have land, lots of it. Most modern cattle ranchers either rent or own large tracts of land, but there are still some areas that have community pastures where you will find cattle from more than one ranch intermingling. When these animals are out to pasture, there is little to be done to care for them. Ranchers make sure their cattle have enough grass to eat and water to drink. They pay careful attention to them and move them to new pastures when necessary. One important piece of equipment for a rancher is something to herd cattle with. Historically, dogs and horses have been used to herd cattle, but today, some ranchers are using ATVs to do their job instead. Cow dogs and horses are carefully trained animals. They respond to their handlers and to the herd to keep them moving in the right direction. Cowboys on horseback ride behind the herd, prompting them to move. They will ride back and forth with the intention of agitating the cattle, so they stop grazing and begin to walk or run. The cowboys work together to circle behind the herd, making sure they all stay together and don't run off. If one cow starts to head in another direction, a cowboy will spur his horse away from the herd to startle it back towards the herd. When ranchers use ATVs for this job, they do the same thing with the ATVs. The advantage of an ATV is that it doesn't get thirsty or tired like a horse. However, a horse with an experienced cowboy on its back has a significant advantage of being able to turn on a dime. An experienced cowpony also has instincts that help the cowboy to herd effectively. If dogs are used alongside horses, they respond instinctively to the movement of the cattle and also follow instructions from the cowboys. Ranchers need to round up cattle in order to tag or brand new additions to the herd. They also round them to bring them home for the winter months in cold climates so that they can be fed hay and silage in fields close to home. Cattle drives occur in the spring and fall when ranchers move their cattle to the larger range for the summer and bring them home for the winter. A cattle drive is often a community event. Ranchers help each other out, and extra people are hired for the duration of the drive. Historically, cattle were driven to market this way, often over long distances and for many weeks or months, in order to sell the cattle. Today, most cattle are loaded onto trucks to be taken to market. Modern ranchers have sophisticated setups of pen and chutes to funnel their cattle through. This helps ranch hands avoid having to wrestle each one so it can be tagged, branded, immunized, or otherwise cared for. The cattle are easily driven into large pens and then herded towards a chute where there is no room to turn around or escape. They must walk forward into the squeeze where they are isolated and relatively still and easy to work with. Once the ranch hand is done with it, the animal is released into another pen. This system makes caring for cattle much more efficient than it was in the past. Storage and processing. If you've ever gone shopping for a steak at a store or ordered one in a restaurant, you might have encountered claims that the steak was aged 14 days or aged 28 days. Have you ever wondered what this means? Beef is usually hung in a climate-controlled environment to age. As the meat ages, the enzymes in the muscle tissues begin to break the tissues down. This creates a more desirable texture and flavor. In a perfect temperature-controlled environment, beef can be aged for over a month, depending on the method used. Most professional butchers age meat for 14 days to reach maximum tenderness and 21 days or beyond to begin to develop more complex flavors. Some butchers cut large pieces off the carcass to dry age. These cuts are generally very expensive, as dry aging is a process that requires much finesse to achieve the desired result. Butcher shops often receive slaughtered meat to age, cut, and package in their own facility. This used to be common in grocery store meat departments as well. However, today, most grocery stores do not package the majority of the meat they sell. Most meat sold in grocery chains is processed in a large packaging plant and then is shipped to grocery stores in refrigerated trucks. If an animal is not being taken to a professional butcher with an adequate cooling system, it is recommended to only age the beef for a week or so to ensure none of the meat goes bad before it is processed and packaged. Processing your own meat can be a rewarding experience. It is a lot cheaper than paying for professionally butchered meat, and having a freezer full of meat makes meal planning both easier and cheaper throughout the year. If you cut, wrap, and freeze your own meat, you may want to consider marinating your steaks for a few days before throwing them on the barbecue to achieve maximum tenderness. When you buy beef from the store, you can choose whatever cuts of meat you would like to cut up for dinner. A wide variety of beef cuts are available, and they can be prepared in so many ways. You can also find frozen hamburgers in boxes in the freezer section, along with the other pre-made meals that use hamburger, like lasagna or meat pies. Beef is an amazingly versatile meat that can be prepared many different ways, from perfectly grilled steaks to tender roasts and roasted brisket to tacos and meatballs. The meal ideas are endless with the delicious meat. No wonder cattle ranchers are so common. A hands-on activity would be to research how to make beef jerky. There are several different ways to make it, including using an oven, dehydrator, or a smoker. You can make your very own treat for use on a hike or a trail. And a good thing to do is to consult either Gregory or Levi or Peter, because they've all made jerky. Okay, that concludes lesson 8 for today.